The remnants of a great civilization tell the story of a prosperous community. That story runs beyond 2,500 long years. It is the story of the hydraulic civilization of Sri Lanka, where irrigation was its lifeblood. With irrigation, it was possible to paint the landscape of the dry zone of the country in blue and green, which otherwise would have been visible as a mere brown patch. Irrigation, even today, is the lifeblood of a large majority of Sri Lankan people, especially of the rural communities. The center of Sri Lanka is mountainous, and it gradually becomes flat towards the sea around the whole country. Sri Lanka has 103 rivers commencing from the central hill country and which flow to the sea right around the island like spikes in a wheel. Two monsoons bring rain to the country. The northeast monsoon brings rain to the whole country during September till December, while the southwest monsoon brings rain to the mountain ranges and the southwesterly part of the country from May till July. Sri Lanka can be divided into two distinct zones called dry and wet, depending on the magnitude and pattern of the rainfall. The wet zone gets about 200 inches of rainfall in a year, while the dry zone gets only 40 inches. Because of the year-round rainfall in the wet zone, it has a tropical rainforest cover, whereas the dry zone has only scrub jungles. The low vegetation, long solar hours due to a relatively cloud-free sky, and fertile soil has made the dry zone a rich agricultural area. The perennial streams that commence from the central hills in the rain-rich wet zone bring large volumes of water to the dry zone on its way to the sea. The northeast monsoon also generates a substantial yield. When the water from both these sources is stored, it may be used for cultivation during the dry period. Because of these reasons, the dry zone has been the seat of the ancient hydraulic civilization. Sri Lanka is considered one of the few countries that developed irrigation first. According to the written record, the Basavakkulama tank was built in the 3rd century BC and is considered the oldest tank in Sri Lanka. The technology used in the construction of this tank has been so complex, it is difficult to believe that this would have been the first tank built by our ancestors. Not only small tanks that served single villages, but also huge irrigation networks consisting of big and small tanks and diversion weirs serving large valleys were features of this hydraulic civilization. 30,000 tanks have been constructed within the dry zone of 24,000 square miles. Tanks have been built across major rivers, and even trans-basin canals have been added to these tanks to bring water from other river valleys which are richer in water resources. A classic example is the diversion canal from the richer Mahavalley to the less endowed Peruara. This is called the Minneriya Kantale Giant Canal, and it is about 20 miles long and has a conveying capacity of 2,600 cubic feet per second. The giant diversion canal that supplied water to the city of Anuradhapura from Kalaweva is another amazing example. It is 54 miles long, and the gradient in the first 17 miles is such that there is only a 6-inch drop every 1 mile. The British engineers were surprised when they discovered details about this gradient. Before the canal reaches Malwatuoya, it passes two other river basins and is replenished from those as well. The sluice tower called Bisokotua that allows water to be released to the canal without damage to the dam is another invention that was behind the success of ancient engineering. R.L. Breuer, Surveyor General of the British era, has recorded his admiration of the ancient system, saying, "We have evidence before our eyes of a bund of over 17 million cubic yards. 120 miles long, a railway line could have been constructed with the same effort today. We know, as a matter of fact, that flaws discovered in these works by the modern experts were proved to be not flaws, but the result of an imperfect understanding of the design." Not only building such a massive network of irrigation, but maintaining it too would have been an enormous task. This was made possible probably because of the Rajakarya system that prevailed at that time, where it was mandatory of beneficiaries to maintain the system as an obligation paid to the king. The ancient rock inscriptions provide proof of such a system. Battalagoda, Elahara, Minipe, and Kondawatwana are some examples. In ancient tanks, rock carvings of a multi-headed snake is kept close to the sluice, probably to emphasize the importance of protecting these national assets. The Kalavava, constructed by King Dhatusena. Kantale and Minneri are built by King Mahasen. Kaudulla by Queen Bisobandara, the sister of King Mahasen. Giritale by the King Agbo II. Basavakkulava by King Pandukhabaya. Padaviya by King Saddhatissa. Nachaduva and the Sea of Parakrama that were built combining ancient Dimbutulu, Topa and Eramudu tanks still remain as testimony to the great ancient hydraulic civilization. Providing irrigation was not only considered a duty by the ancient kings, but also as a sacred act. Parakramabahu the Great is considered the king who built the most number of irrigation works. The great king said, "Let us not allow even a single drop of water to enter the sea without using it for the benefit of man." He also did his utmost to achieve what he believed in by constructing 163 major tanks, 2,376 village tanks, and 3,910 canals, and strengthening 165 old dams. The multi-storied buildings made of brick and stone, the landscaped gardens with attractive ponds, big temples, and finely crafted Buddha statues of rock remain as evidence of a great civilization built upon irrigation that earned the country the name Granary of the East. There is no evidence of irrigation works after the 12th century. Foreign invasions, especially from the Indian subcontinent, destroyed some of the ancient irrigation works before 1505. Since then, it was the naval powers of the West, the Portuguese, the Dutch, and the British, who incurred damage upon the irrigation works. By damaging the hydraulic infrastructure, they believed that they could weaken the Sri Lankan people as a nation. During the Portuguese period, there is no evidence of any positive measures taken in the field of irrigation. The Dutch, in the latter part of their rule, showed some interest, and they have restored some schemes such as Kiramaoya and Yotawawa. However, it was only the British who gave serious thought to restoring the irrigation systems in a systematic manner. Especially after the 1848 insurrection, they realized it was not advisable to ignore irrigation any further. The gross error in neglecting irrigation has been accepted even by the British elite. John Keane, the British consultant, in his report to the government has said that the first 50 years of British history in terms of irrigation can be divided into two. The first era is characterized by negligence and the second era by unintentional discouragement. The British rulers also realized that they had to feed the additional population they brought as estate labor from India for their plantation economy, and restoring irrigation in the country could have contributed to ease that problem as well. They also realized that they were responsible for the collapse of rural life that was based on irrigation, and that the people were not happy about it. All these made them consider irrigation far more seriously. They initially focused on restoring village tanks. Later, they conducted detailed studies with a view to restoring total systems. From 1855 to 60, Sir Henry Ward, then Governor of Sri Lanka, instructed the Public Works Department to undertake a number of restoration projects. They also were keen in finding out the details of the amazing irrigation technology of ancient engineers. People like Henry Parker, R.L. Breuer, and John Keane have documented their findings. For example, no direct issues had been made from the tank, as there had been no fertile farmland just below the tank. Water is released to the river, and a separate pickup anicut is built further downstream to divert water to adjoining fertile farmlands. The Padavia scheme is an example of this. This kind of arrangement found in the ancient systems shows the wisdom of the ancestors. The first irrigation ordinance was enacted in 1856.
Asau, Sri Buddha Varsha 2532
The regulations promulgated by the Sri Lankan dynasty with regards to irrigation over years were given legal status under the British rule with this ordinance. By 1887, provincial irrigation boards were formed, and they were entrusted the irrigation restoration work. Management of water distribution was done by the village headman under the supervision of the government agent of the district. Policy matters were decided by the Central Irrigation Board, chaired by the governor himself. There was a resurgence of rural life as a result of these developments. The irrigation schemes that were covered by overgrown jungles started waking up from their long, deep sleep. The irrigation schemes which the British destroyed after the 1818 insurrection were also coming up again, and this time with the patronage of the British themselves. To accelerate this resurgence, the British rulers established the Irrigation Department in the year 1900.